Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Second Samuel, chapter 22. We are now in verse 16. As we begin with verse 16, let me remind all of us that this is part of a hymn of appreciation, a hymn of praise, a song of adoration in remembrance of who God is. And here we will learn a lot more about David's view of God as he describes God in the song. It is also a song that lauds God for his help and deliverance from his enemies. And this is a song that is prepared by David as he sings it at the end of all his battles. Now, this is important for us to bear in mind. And so, what we have seen are a lot of imagery of the poetic way of describing the presence of God thus far, in the form of darkness, in the form of brilliance, in the form of lightning, in the form of thunder. Now, all of these are descriptions of the presence of God. Now, continuing on in chapter 22, verse 16, it says, um, and then, this is the word, and then, after all that he has described in terms of the cosmic occurrences that shapes and presents the presence of God, the channels of the sea appear. Now, let me just explain this word channels. Channels would be ravines. The ravines under the sea, the ravines of the sea, the hollow of the sea appeared, was seen, right? Was seen. So what you would think of is that one of the things that comes to mind is that David is describing that his condition is like he's in the middle of a sea. But I think one of the pictures or imagery that plays in the mind is about the opening of the Red Sea, right? The opening of the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea. Now, the idea here is that if you find that this would be crossing the 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 earth's crack, I would say, if this was the Sinai Peninsula, right? So what we have is that it is commonly believed that the crossing of the Red Sea came somewhere here. This is the Sinai Peninsula, and this is the Arabian Peninsula. And there is a crack on the ground, actually. You'd find that this is the Jordanian Rift. The Jordanian Rift. Now, a rift is actually a crack in the ground. And so that part is very deep. It comes down from the north above, way above the Sea of Galilee, and it becomes the Jordan River, and it ends into the Dead Sea, and the crack continues on to the uh, to the well, this is the Gulf of Aqaba, and it would be part of the Red Sea or the Sea of Reed, Yam Suf in the Hebrew. And so when you talk about the ravines, in this case, that would be, I would presume, this deep opening as the sea opens from the Egyptian side to the Arabian side. For the Israelites to cross, they would be able to see the channels within the bottom of the sea, very deep. According to geological surveys, somewhat like 800 meters deep in the area of the crack. Now, the continuation of this statement is this. You find that the foundations of the world were exposed, and this, you can say that this is an A and a B. Now, understand this. The word foundations of the world is the channels, exposed appeared. So you can see the what we call the synonym effect of two statements, basically saying about the same thing. And so the idea of the foundation of the world, and the word foundation here literally means something that you can see something flowing. And I guess by world, this would be the earth. So the foundations of the world gives a picture that there is a rift that is coming out, and they are crossing the sea, right? And there is a land bridge that they have found right here. But what I'm trying to explain, and perhaps that's what is happening, is that you can see at the bottom here the lava flow or the magma. And this is what I would say would explain the foundations of the world, which is actually this part, the bottom part. So the foundations of the world were exposed, the things that's flowing underneath, because this is a rift. It is a crack in the earth. And that is why the entire area is filled with volcanoes and earthquakes and a lot of these volcanic activities. Now, in so doing, that would be the picture that we now can, I guess, appreciate from the text here. By the rebuke of the Lord from the blast of the breath of his nostrils. Again, here you find that this is another A and B. How were they exposed? How did they come out? Be a rebuke, a reproof of God. Right? This is like scolding, angry, and the blast of breath literally will give you this word, the neshama. This whole word here, the blast of the breath, is the neshama. Is like the breath that is blown into the nostrils of man. So the neshama of ruach. Now, of course, in the English, it is a bit inverted. Blast refers to ruach, which is wind, a blast of air. Breath would be neshama. So this is the neshama of ruach from his nostrils. So the idea here is God brings about the wind to blow it back to expose dry land for them to cross. So that would be the place. And this how David is relating to how God has saved him or delivered him. Verse 17, he sent from on high, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. Well, he sent from on high would be all of these, right? We're now talking about verse 16 in continuation, the blast of breath from on high. And with that, God took him. The idea of taking and draw out is like drawing out water. It's to pull out. And so this is an A and this is a B. This is a picture, the image of being snatched away. So this is the idea of the deliverance, right? The deliverance. It's a picture. So everything we are reading now is part of a song. And so as much as we have literal meanings of words, the meaning of what David is expressing in the song is actually the imagery, not so much in the literal sense of the word. Continuing on in verse 18, he rescued me from my strong enemies, for those who hated me, for they were too strong for me. So understand that this is strong enemy. My strong enemy is those who hate me. So we have an A and a B. And so the idea here is it is God who rescued me. This word rescue is snatched away. It is also to rescue, to deliver, to save. That's the word here. So this is what God is doing to rescue David from strong enemies, and that he finds it difficult to fight. And these are strong enemies. The ones who hate me are considered enemies, and they were too strong. They were very strong. So too strong is a good word. And it is then you can say that David was unable to protect himself. And so this song describes how God, in his time of dire need, when he's unable to help himself, God rescued him from the danger. That is from verse 16 to verse 18. Verse 19. They confronted me on the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. I think this is easy for us to understand. The idea of confront literally means to stand in front. To stand in front of me on the day of my disaster. The word here is calamity. Calamity, distress. What else is this? The time where he is facing destruction, right? So on the day of my disaster is a time where he is seeing times that he is not able to sustain himself, and says that, and then Jehovah was my support. Now, this idea of support is, well, I guess you could say that this is his the the stay, the staff, the sustenance to hold him up, right? That is the concept here. And so God is supporting him in the day that he is facing distress, facing calamity. Verse 20, he also brought me out into an open place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. So understand this. The word distress, disaster is contrasted to an open place. The open place is a safe place. So God has brought him into a place of safety. And he says that he has rescued me. And this word rescued me literally means he has removed me. what else? He has well, I guess you could say he has removed me, delivered me. And the whole idea here is this is a rescue, a salvation for him. So a safe place here is understood as a place of salvation. He brought me into an open place means he rescued me. So we have here another A and a B. But the reason is what I would like to point out to you. The reason that David says, why did God do that? And this would be a condition that we can see that God is delighted in me. Now, the idea of delight literally means take pleasure. Take pleasure. Or you would say, pleased with David, right? What else you can say? Happy with David. These are all words that we could use for delight. You find this word in, say, Psalm chapter 1, chapter 1, verse 2. And it says, but his delight is in the law of God, right? And it's important for us to understand that word delight is a general word that's used to show that you have taken notice and taking pleasure, delight in the law of God. You take action with the law of God, with the Torah. When Jehovah is delighted in me, David, God then takes action on that pleasure on David by doing this, by rescuing him, taking him into an open place, into a safe place. And so this is a condition how God views, argue that David has done so many things that is what we would today consider wrong. And how would God view David as somebody he's happy with? And now let's get into the text in the next few verses so that you can understand David's defense of why God has rescued him, saved him, and delivered him from the enemies in all the wars that he has fought. Verse 21, the Lord has treated me in accordance with my righteousness, in accordance with the cleanness of my hands, has repaid me. Now, let's take a look at some of these words. The Lord has treated me. And the word treated me means recompense. Right? Recompense. To reward. So God has rewarded me in accordance. Now, the idea of in accordance means there is a particular set of conditions with my righteousness. And the word righteousness would be tzedakah. So my righteousness really means the things that David did that was right before God. The treatment of justice in his nation, in accordance with the cleanness. Now, this word here, the cleanness of hand. Cleanness means purity. This is purity as made clean of my hands, his actions. God has repaid me. Now, the idea of repayment is to return. To return. to David. Now, what does all this mean? Understand that this is a continuation, right? A continuation of verse 20. So this idea here is he treated me, recompensed me, so repaid me. That is exactly what is stated in accordance with my righteousness. So in accordance with the cleanliness or the purity of my hands. This is exactly an A and a B. So David is saying that God has done all these things because he delighted in David. He is happy with David. Why is God happy with David? So David is now saying, God has rewarded me because of my rightness. Now, people would suggest, right, the rightness of what David has done is that he has never taken the life of Saul. Even when he had the opportunity to do that, he would only take off or cut off a corner of his garment without having to kill an innocent king or the anointed of God. And that was very clear in the mind of David that Saul was the anointed, and he did not do that. And in the treatment of war, he has done well. Now, that would be some of the things that we can understand from the book of First Samuel as he recollect some of these events. So, what is so right about not killing Saul when he could? Because Saul was gunning for him. And he treated Saul as the anointed, God's Mashiach, because it is God who put the king there. He may want to kill David, but David did the right thing of not responding to Saul to kill him when he could, twice. So that would be one way of looking at it. Uh, so that you could see that God looks at David quite differently from how we would look at David today, perhaps. So let us not view this song that David is expressing using 21st century glasses. We should read this with first and second Samuel glasses, how they would in the old days, how God would treat David, and look at David as a man after his own heart. Basically, that David will carry out all of God's instructions as opposed to Saul when he was told to destroy the Amalekites, the Agagites, the king Agag, which he didn't. And so that would be how God would view David and not how we would view David. So, what is important here in the song is how God views David and how David understands that of God. It is not that he hasn't done anything wrong in his life, but at the time where it matters, he did not take somebody else's life into his hands, namely Saul. In verse 22, this is a declaration of David. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not acted wickedly against my God. We need to actually explain and understand everything that David is saying here. So the first one here is, I have kept, right? I have kept, and this word kept here is guarded. I have guarded the ways of the Lord. The ways of the Lord are the journey, is the journey. It is the conduct of life that God has stipulated how to govern Israel. And so it says, I have guarded the ways. What God has told me to do, I have done. I have not acted wickedly against my God. The word guilty here is rasha. Rasha. Now let me explain this. Rasha Although translated as wicked, it literally means to walk away from God, as well as his commandments. So this one you can see in Psalm chapter 1. So what David is saying is that I have not walked away. So if God told me to do this, I will do that. And so this means that he is a man after God's heart. And this would be God's mind or will or decisions, right? And that would be God's commands. So David is saying, I have not gone away. I have not gone away against my God. That would be the picture of verse 22. Verse 23. For all his ordinances were before me. Before me is in front of my eyes. Or basically sitting opposite. So you're looking at it, basically. That would be the picture. And as for his statutes, I did not deviate from them. The idea of deviate is to turn aside. So both of this would be saying, in somewhat of a contrast, this one here literally says that David is looking at the ordinances, right? The ordinances. With regards to statutes, he did not go away from the statutes. That's the visible or imagery expression of verse 23. Verse 24. I was also blameless toward him, and I have kept myself from my wrongdoing. So look at it this way. What do you mean I was blameless toward him? He is saying that I am tamim. I am complete. I am perfect. I am whole. My entirety is with God. I am innocent toward him. That's the idea. I am completely in step with God. I have kept myself from my wrongdoings. No, this means my avon, my guilt, right? We can talk about it, or my iniquity. So I have kept myself in the sense, I have guarded myself, right? I have protected myself. And so what are we talking about? He is now saying that I am blameless before God. I have kept myself from my guilt, my iniquity. I have not allowed any of this to obstruct my relationship with God. And this is to reflect that after David has gone past Psalm 51. So you need to understand, it is not that he had never ever had any iniquity. It is not to say that he has never ever done anything wrong. It is to say that after he has resolved that with God, and after God has forgiven him, that he has kept himself blameless. He has kept himself complete. That is what it means. So we need to understand that whenever it is expressed, it is with reference to the time that these statements are said. All right. And hence it is not about his entire lifetime. This is with regards to the present time when he is saying these words. And so it is true then that after the episode with Bathsheba, uh, he was forgiven. And yet the consequences fell upon him and the family. He was virtually chased away from his throne. But for all that has happened, he has not once gone against God. And that is what is being said. And all the way through the end of the period of time where all the wars and battles are over, he's reminiscing in those years that he has maintained his blamelessness, his perfection before God. And so, can a person be blameless before God? And the answer is yes. And David has done that. It's not to say that he has never failed God, but whenever he failed God, he was able to repent and face up to his own failure, face up to his own iniquity. And he has not allowed his iniquity to stop himself from being obedient to God. And that would be verse 24. Verse 25. So verse 25 says, and then, this would be the and then, after all this said and done, and then the Lord has repaid me in accordance with my righteousness, in accordance with my cleanliness before his eyes. Now, all of these are the assertions by David, his own personal testimony. He says, and then God, Jehovah, has repaid me. This word repaid me comes from the word repent or cause to return, caused to return to me in accordance with my righteousness. My righteousness is tzedakah, being right before God, being just, and in implemented justice before God. And this word, in accordance with my cleanliness, or the cleanness. I think that would be the right word, cleanness or purity. Purity comes from the word something, something that has been cleansed. All right. So do not mistake that purity means it's pure from the start. It means pure from the time it has been cleansed. And in this case, David is seeing that he is cleansed before the eyes of God, that God has repaid me. He has rewarded me according to the justice I have implemented and in accordance to what he has made me clean before his eyes, that I'm doing it, doing it right. And so in many ways, you would see that this is also an A and a B. It is about the life of David, seen by God to be pure. And so understand, purity is that he has been cleansed. It's not that he has always been pure forever and ever, but when he was smeared, when he had iniquity, he was cleansed. That is what it means. Verse 26. It says, with the faithful, you show yourself faithful. With the blameless, you prove yourself blameless. Now, there is a sequence, right? There's a sequence of how would you say, in these next three verses, David is now making comparison how God relates to different people. I think that would be a better way of expressing it. How does God relate to the faithful? Now, the word faithful here uh, is actually chesed, and that would be kind, right? With the one who is kind, God shows himself kind. So God never shows himself differently to different people. Now, this is a very important theme that comes in the next three verses, that God relates to different people the same way that those people relate to God. Now, this is a very interesting concept. So now we have the person, and then we have God relating to him. And basically, how the person relates to God is how God returns that favor. So let's look at this. To the one who is kind, God will show himself kind. With the blameless, now the word blameless means the one who is, well, unfortunately, this one does not mean blameless. This one means uh, with a warrior who is upright, who is mighty. Then you find that God himself, who is upright, who is mighty, who is complete, who is blameless, then God himself will then show himself the same way. That means that God will show himself to this person as a warrior, as upright, as complete, as blameless towards this person. So you're seeing that there is a theme that's going from 26 to 28 to show how God deals with various people. And it really depends on how people relate to God, right? It depends on the person first. Then God will show himself that way. Verse 27. With the one who is pure, you show yourself pure. But with the perverted, you show yourself astute. So now let us look at what it means. With the one who is pure, the idea of pure means the one who has, this word here, who has purified himself, made himself pure, cleansed himself, right? Cleansed himself, or tested himself, or purged himself. All these are good words. Or proven himself. All about character. To the one who has proven himself, you show yourself as what we call pure, right? As one who uh, is very, how should we say, as one who, yeah, to show himself pure, uh, as one who would choose rightly for this person. And that gives the connotation of being proven, that God will show himself proven, that he will be just to choose rightly and deal with the pure, the one who has purged himself as one who has been tested in the choices. Now, this other one in verse 27, to the perverted. The perverted would be a crooked one, one who is perverse, right? Perverse, who is false. I think we could use this word. And then God says that he shows himself, that he will cause himself to, how should we say, to be or appear to be unsavory. It would be to show himself as, how should we say, as 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 judging severely. I think that would be a way to express this. It comes from the same word of perverse. So what God is saying, that if you twist things, I will twist you. If you clean yourself, I will clean you. If you are upright and blameless, I will be upright with you. So you see, these two verses are showing how God will relate to the one who relates to God. Let's do one more verse, verse 28. In verse 20, in verse 28, and you save an afflicted people, but your eyes are on the haughty. You humiliate. So let's follow this through. So there are the afflicted people. The afflicted people would be the humble people. I wouldn't say that this is afflicted as in being oppressed, but this is the poor, right? To the humble, to the poor, then God will deliver them, because they are unable to help themselves. So God will help them. That is what it means. So God looks at the person's character. Next, your eyes are on the haughty. The word haughty are people who are lofty, arrogant. So God's eyes are looking at the arrogant, and then it's not that God will humiliate him. God will cause uh, cause to be made low, to humble. So this is a contrast, right? A contrast between lofty and arrogant and made low. So that God will take the arrogant, those who think that they are very high and mighty, and God will bring them down. That is what it means in verse 28. Verse 29. For you are my lamp, Lord, and the Lord illuminates my darkness. So what does this mean? You are my lamp. It sounds a little bit like Psalm 119. And so understand that this is a lamp. So in the old days, a lamp looks very much like this. And you get the fire through a wick. And this would be called a lamp, right? You are my lamp. And it is supposed to give out light, isn't it? It's supposed to give out light so you can see light. And so the Lord illuminates my darkness. The idea of illuminate here means to also from the right. It takes on the idea of a lamp, and the word lamp is neg, and then the word to illuminate is the verb, uh, and that would be to shine, naga, and it's cause. And so this word here is cause to shine, cause to be light. I think that would be a good way of saying it, right? Cause to be light, cause to shine in my darkness. And this would be when he cannot see, cannot see. So when there is no light, you cannot see, God provides that light. So that is how David relates to God. And so it would not be surprising for Psalm 119 to be David's psalm. Now, he wrote this and he sees that God is my lamp. God shines in my light, right? Now let us look at well, I guess we can look at verse 30 and we will wrap it up for today. Now, verse 30 is somewhat different. So, for by you I can run at a troop of warriors, and by my God I can leap over a wall. Now, this is an imagery, so please bear with me. The imagery is this: you can run, or you can outrun a band, and this word here is a band, or what we call it, a troop of soldiers, right? A troop of soldiers, an army. So basically, you'll find that if this is a bunch of army people, David is saying that I can actually run at the army. So he is not afraid. He is imagining himself that now God is with him. He has, well, I guess you can think of it, super strength, right? I can run at an army. I can run at an army. This one here is leap over. I think this leap over is to spring over, which means that David is thinking of himself that if you are at the wall of a city, he is able to jump over the wall. Now, this is an imagery. It's not that David can actually do that, but he is thinking that when God is with him, he can do anything. So just think of it. This is a song. This is a description of David's relationship with God, and it's placed in very imagery-driven type of words, so that we now can appreciate how intimate David knows God. Now, with this, we come to the end of our session today.